Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Fisher with Senior Resource Connectors, and today is a day I've been looking forward to for a long time. I've been talking to Cameron about this book that he's been working on for a couple of years. Cameron, yeah,
8 years, my
Eight-
friend.
a couple
8 years.
years, and uh, and so we are here to talk about it. It was released recently, and Cameron's been on episode back in season one talking about hospice and palliative care and its impact on our community and aging families and how to interpret and work together with hospice and palliative care. But Cameron is here to talk about Cameron today in the book that he's launched and released called Finally Fearless. So Cameron Svendsen, thank you for being here. It's good to see your face, man.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. It's always good to talk to you.
Tell me, how's it feel to be a published author?
It's a little surreal because there was a time where I didn't think it would get done. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to spend the next 30 days in the
Yeah.
bunker, right? And you would be like off the grid for a month, and you were down. I We were talking before we jumped on here, and I've been working on a project for our business, but it feels very big personally to have come up the hill for as long as you've been walking up the hill and put your flag at the top and go, here are my observations. This is what I've experienced, and here are my thoughts to share with the world to help them up the mountain themselves. And so, how does that feel to you to know that you've traveled some road to get here?
Well, it feels great. I think when I first started, I've talked to my wife about this regularly. When I first started, this was more of a cathartic journey for me personally.
Mm,
Taking some of the concepts that I had started back when I worked for Hospice of Arizona back in like 2010, 2011, 12, and really shaping a lot of the things that were very elementary,
mm,
important, but not well thought through. And taking those concepts and really dedicating an entire chapter for each. Whereas it was just an hour long PowerPoint back then, beginning, I was able to take the concepts within that PowerPoint, say, focus. I'm really going to tell stories of patients and really, really take the journey. And again, it was for me, it's just to get it out there. But as that took shape, I started to realize, okay, this is not just for me and my own fear, my own apprehension of mortality. This is really something that I've got to share with, you know?
bigger, the bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What we glean along the way, um, I feel compelled to share where those, and it's Senior Resource Connectors, Cameron, our full thrust and focus is on the 45 to 65, the 40 to 60-year-old crowd, my group, because we're living the reality that our parents are aging and man, in some cases now my colleagues are getting sick, and we've lost some of my own colleagues at my age, but this is close to home. And so for those of you that are watching and have been part of our podcast all these years or webcast, pay close attention, because when Cameron takes on the issue of fear and authors a book called Finally Fearless, there must be a journey that we can take that helps us get to that place of peace, of security, of finality, without fear and anxiety and feeling desperate. I'm assuming that's where we're going here.
Yes, that is correct. I mean, everybody from a scale of 0 to 10, 1 to 10, I guess. I don't know if anybody can do zero, but the level of fear that you might have as you look at your own mortality. Okay. And I think if you are one, maybe this book isn't for you. If you're saying, I'm good. I've done everything I need to do. I know where I'm going next. I'm great. If you're a one,
Yeah.
no need to read. But by virtue of all the stories that I tell in there of patients that were fearful of dying along the way and their families, right?
Yeah.
All of the people that used to push me out of the hospital say, do not say that word. Don't say hospice to me. Don't talk about. And I was sitting there trying to sell something I thought was a really great program, a great service in hospice. And I got half the family saying, we're not ready for that.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter if the hospital says you are, it doesn't matter if the doctor says you are. If family and the patient are saying, you're not ready for that, the question is not, when will you be ready? The question remains, will you ever be ready?
Mhm.
And so this book dives into that. It dives into the fear that everybody has on some level, the apprehension, but specific fears about it, not just death.
No, I was taken by the title of your many of the chapters. It's, fear, pain, and suffering, fear of dying, fear of leaving behind your loved ones, fear of
Right,
loss of control. I mean, you're talking about core things with people,
right,
right?
right. And we don't talk about that within the hospice space. We just say, here's the program, do you want it or not?
Yeah,
That the counseling that needs to occur between a really good hospice representative or palliative care representative,
yeah,
doctor, any
yeah,
provider,
yeah,
that has to be about the fear. That doesn't have to be about the program.
yeah, yeah. Hey, from the very beginning, the story to me drew me in about the young social worker being thrown into the hot seat with that physician that day. Tell that story and how
Sure.
that shaped everything to come, really.
Yeah. So, famous, renowned pulmonologist in the West Valley, Dr. Jeffrey, just a wonderful physician, has passed away a couple of years ago now. For a couple of decades, at least a couple of decades, he was a prominent figure for a office out there, but he also was very involved with Del Webb Hospital. And Del Webb Hospital this was 1998 ish, 90. That was when it was Sun Health. It wasn't Banner, and things were
Right.
done a certain way, and still catered to senior citizens, obviously, right? But I had just started. I had just been out of my master's in social work program. I was asked to be a part of this team, social work team inside this hospital. And I'm sitting there charting one day, and I was just getting to know everybody, just getting to know the feeling of what it's like to chart on a patient inside a hospital. It's a little daunting already when you've done it before. Going into these patients' rooms and they're sick and you're not, and you're trying to empathize and sympathize. Anyway, Dr. Ron comes onto the unit. He looks around for, who wants, which is the social worker. It was me at that moment. And he said, Cameron, knew me well enough, knew my name after being there for, 4 or 5 months. Cameron, I need your help with something. It was like, I kind of looked around at everybody, and the nurses and the therapist kind of looked at me like, so he said, come on, let's go. And he starts walking down the hallway toward patients' rooms. And along the way, he says, this patient doesn't have long to live. And I really need your help right now in figuring out a plan for them. And I thought, okay, I'm like, that sounds good to me. I'll help you as much as I can. We walk into the patient's room, patient surrounded by family, probably 5 or 6 family members. Patient's an 89-year-old guy. And Dr. Ron says, Bernie, granted the names have been changed, but Bernie, hey, I've been your pulmonologist for years. I know you, buddy. And I'm here to just talk to you a little bit about the future. So we've done as much as we can with your respiratory condition. And it's gotten to a point where we can't do anything else. You are terminal. And I'm going to allow Cameron to talk to you about the next steps. So it's been a pleasure taking care of you. Here's Cameron. And he walks out.
Walk.
And I said to myself in my head, what the hell am I going to say to this
It,
patient?
having been a nurse in similar situations in psych units where I used to work, I was like, I know how you must have felt in the moment. Like, oh my,
I was talk
stunned.
about fear. I,
Yeah.
I was beads of sweat and collection on my forehead, and I'm thinking, he's going to come back in, right? This has got to be a joke. He can't be. He's a renowned
Yeah.
pulmonologist that the family is counting on for some kind of answer here.
Right. Right.
The answer, but this was way before I knew anything about hospice and
Sure.
palliative care to the extent that I do.
Sure.
I knew enough to pick up the phone and call a hospice. That's about what I knew. But having a dialogue with a family. So, I've got a lot of anger and a lot of apprehension and all of these things that naturally a patient and a family are through at that moment. So, yeah, that's a story that I tell at the beginning of this book because it
But
left such an impression, having had to kind of learn on the fly.
learn on the fly. I could put myself totally in that place. I've been there with other physicians in different settings, of course. Um, but I could see why um, you saw immediately, right, the need for a lot more and in a different conversation than to go, well, good luck. Like I get it. That's the bottom line to it, but there's a way different way to get to the bottom line with people.
Well, look, this doctor was in the right. I just didn't know what I was supposed to
Well,
do.
no,
But because that happened, trial by fire, I can look at the evolution of my career and I did wrong,
yeah.
how not to do that.
You used a term that I thought was really unique, mortality mediator.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about that.
Well, I mean, that's, I guess, what I'm kind of saying with this story is I've learned how to be a mediator for patients and families
Right.
in these moments. I mean, whether working for palliative care and hospice or whether I'm just, the social worker that's sitting there
Yeah.
trying to listen to all of the things that are going on. Because every family member has different history of how they got to the family that they are, relationships they have with their siblings and the relationships that they have with their parents and their own kids. They're bringing them to dialogues, many with their family. It comes to having to talk about mortality, possible loss of a loved one. There are a lot of emotion,
Yeah.
and I call this fear. I'm sure there's a lot of different tags we can put on this,
Yeah.
but I do see fear in the eyes of patients and families, and if we don't address that, can't really get to the next step about the resources that we tell them about.
Do you find them just shutting down and then they just can't hear it and they just don't want to talk anymore? Or
We
when you
don't
hit
see a
that
lot
line?
of shutting. Maybe I haven't seen a lot of shutting down. I definitely have seen a lot of, I can't talk about this right now, but call me we have to wait until my family gets here
Yeah.
because I'm not the decision maker. I can't make these decisions without my family members present. There's
Yeah.
a lot of that, which is a
Yes.
stalling technique.
Yeah. I was having a conversation, thought about you after I had it. I'm talking to a gentleman who's a Phoenix fireman. So, okay, he's wired to be a rescuer, a savior. He's the oldest son. Think about who you're sitting in front of. Mom has form of dementia that's probably a little more progressed than what he's understanding. Circumstances brought her from out of town to live at his particular into his home. Recently, while he was at work, his mom almost lit his own house on fire while she was ironing, left the drapes, moved the drapes, and I don't know, the iron or a lamp got involved and the curtains went up in smoke. Like fireman's worst nightmare, burn down your own house, right?
Jeez.
Yeah. So he's telling me all this and he's trying to create a pathway that mom can live in his backyard. I'm going to build a casita and a cottage. And I looked at him and I heard everything he said. And I said, look, call him Ray. Hey, Ray, you know what? Alzheimer's is undefeated. You can't win. And he just let go. And it was like, look, your mom has a fatal disease here. And your wife is ready to leave. Your kids have lost their mind because grandma's now in the house taking up all this resource and time and space. And you're incredibly loving, heroic man. But like you can't out muscle Alzheimer's disease. You just can't
Well,
muscle up and get over it.
or heart failure or
Or,
cancer, or, I mean, cancer to a degree, but there comes a time in lives where they can't.
and so then help let me help you journey to the point of acceptance is what I said to him. I know you're not ready to hear all this yet, but right, why are so many professionals afraid to have that conversation with people or step away from it? Because you know they are.
Well, I think they're not trained, right?
Okay.
Like I go back to the physicians, and I do throw physicians under the bus a little bit in this book.
Okay, they deserve
And look, I have a lot of physicians that are friends of mine.
it.
So when I say that, it's tongue in cheek. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not in the habit of creating enemies with people that I think do a great job. But I think that when you have a lot of healthcare professionals, and physicians are at the top of that heap of getting trained in saving people's lives, right?
Yeah.
Just like a firefighter,
Yeah.
they're gonna save the house, they're gonna save lives. Paramedics, they're not really in the educational space throughout their career, throughout their training or their schooling to learn how to have conversations when the life can't be saved.
Yeah.
That is counterproductive to what school for. And so being an expert at both, I think where we've gone way wrong over the last 100 years is we expect that our doctors who we've created a bond with, our primary care physicians or our specialists, we also want them to be the ones to talk to us about what end of life looks like. And that might be fair to want to have. It's not fair to the doctor to expect them to be the ones to have it. And so I think where we need to go, and what I kind of talk about in this book is the solutions along the way for whatever fear in the death and dying space that people have. We need to be preparing ourselves for
Right.
the end of our lives, not preparing ourselves to live longer with a chronic or serious illness. That's inherent
Yeah.
in being a human. We want to live, but we also have an obligation to either teach ourselves or our loved ones about what it looks like as things change,
Yeah.
no matter what our age
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And, and when we talk about aging with dignity and things like that, from my perspective, and I've learned so much from you, and I've learned so much from a few other colleagues that have helped me understand, from a palliative perspective, the management of chronic disease, and how much firepower do you throw at stuff when you've got a comorbidity that's terminal, right?
Right.
And so I, I just know, and I love what you just said, that maybe the primary care doc isn't the one to have, but if it's up to us as individuals, and you're trying to teach us this through your book, that we can embrace these things while in my 40s, 50s, and 60s before it's my time, and I
Right.
get to um, embrace it now while maybe my parents are still alive, that I can help them escort, and I can be the loving guide for the family that we need here, besides just waiting for the doctor to handle it or whatever.
Yes. Yes. And if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in and add to that because I don't think you've gotten to the place in the book yet. I know you've read quite a bit of it. If you haven't gotten to the end, there's a really important, I think we need to get to because what's popular right now, and it's been popular for the last 10 or 20 years, is advanced care planning, right?
Yep. Yep.
When I say advanced care planning to you, what's the first thing you think
Oh, my living will and all my powers of attorney done, and
of? Right.
if I need a pulse or any of that kind of stuff.
Right. So, okay. Like that's important, right? I mean,
Right.
if you're in the hospital and if there's a possibility that you as a patient might need intervention that is considered heroic or it's considered artificial.
Yep.
Do you want those things depending on the doctors are saying the likelihood recovery is going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is what advanced care planning is. It's your care wishes made in advance so that your loved ones can make that decision for you, or that the whatever document you have says it itself and your loved ones can just read it and say this is what he wants.
Follow. Yeah.
Very good, all very good, but that does not have to do with end of life planning. That has to do with care in case you do have something go, you know, conscious or you're ventilating, whatever. Where we've missed, I think, the entire premise of this and the fear that is always compounded when people are faced with these end of life scenarios is that it isn't about what kind of care that they want or don't want. Way before that, we need to talk about out of life planning. That's what I call it in this book, not advanced care planning, because it may never get to a point where you're needing ventilation, right?
Mm-hmm.
There might not ever be CPR that needs to actually happen to you. In fact, I would venture to say that that doesn't really happen to a lot of people,
Right.
except in the hospital from time to time. So, out of life planning is the recognition that, and the recognition that our loved ones might not see us as that, might not see themselves as being. So, the conversation needs to occur way before advanced care planning, or a prelude to advanced care planning, so that they recognize that mortality and the fear that is associated with that, if there is any fear,
Yeah.
and that it's open and honest dialogue between loved ones and friends so that they can figure out what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
And then they can have a better conversation about advanced care planning. Because we just, we put these advanced care directives in front of people. We say, fill this out, read
Right.
it, fill it out, and then somehow magically we'll be sure that we access that
Right.
when you're in the hospital someday.
Right.
It's just, it's an archaic system, and it certainly isn't common sense.
Our parents, and we're kind of winded down here, and I can see you and I need to spend another time going through this, but let me ask you this. My parents' generation, maybe your parents' generation, if they were born in the 30s and the 40s, what did they survive? The end of the Depression and World War II and Korea. They've been through a lot. That generation, y'all, is super private, super stubborn, super as a generation. Not saying there's not, but just as a whole, the culture they grew up with was pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They muscled through some of the most challenging times, and then through the prosperity of what America over the last 50 years for a lot of people has been. And so to take on some of these issues when they have not thought about themselves, they've protected themselves, can be like from senior living to hospice care to how are you prepared for finances? Like all of it gets, just as a general, this is a tough group of people, but to have this conversation as adult kids, I know this adult kid really appreciates the learning that you have offered, because it'll make a big difference on how mom and I walk this, and then how I walk it with my kids, and the conversations I have with my own children long before, like you said, before the need.
Yeah, that is precisely who this is for. I can't impact the 80, 90-year-olds except with our current system.
Yeah.
What I want is the system to change and recognize these generational differences and address them adequately.
Yeah, me too. We're here to give you platform to do more teaching for us, and I'd love to do at least another visit and dig into you guys in this book, just all the, like I said, the fear of the unknown, fear of the pain and suffering, fear of aging, loss of control, fear of leaving your loved ones. You guys, each one of those could be a show unto itself. There's a chapter that's a lot of stuff. And Cameron, I'll finish the book, but let's talk through this another visit and do another go around. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, I would love that. And it just to say finally, this is about the solutions that I offer for these fears, not just exposing the fears themselves, because that would be a pretty depressing book. I want to make sure people understand that we're solving some of these problems.
Thank you. And that's what I said at the very beginning. It's like there's a process to get fearless, right? You're going to take us through this book to get us around the horn. Like we're going to visit all these places, but I'm getting the home plate except it's
I love the sports analogy. I do.
Perfect. Well, I can't thank you enough. And I just honor and respect you and respect, taking these years and putting it into something that's this professional, but this son can use, this father can use. And I think that those of the, if you're watching this, Cameron, Amazon, where else are you, where are you listed here?
I have, yeah, Amazon's the place to get it. Either a hard copy as you have there, or the softback, as well as the electronic copy of the e-copy. I have a whole stack over here myself. So if anybody says, "Man, I need you to sign it, can you bring me one?" I've been doing that.
Awesome. Awesome. I may work something out with you and see if we can't get a couple of those out to some of our listeners or something, and
Of course.
maybe a signed copy. So I'll figure that out with you on the details. Cameron's information will be in the show notes here, you guys. We couldn't thank you enough. And Senior Resource Connector has been here since 2021, really talking to those of us in that age, that adult kid, that 45 to 65-year-old slot that need so much support as we are challenged by the aging journey of our loved ones, and we want to lead the way better for our own kids and families. So thanks, Ben, for the time. I really appreciate it. To our
Thank you
audience,
for the
thank you for
opportunity.
joining us. Yeah, you bet. We'll do this again. Look down the road, and Cameron will be a guest again during season 3. So thanks again. We'll get out of here. Take care.
Okay. Thank you.